And welcome back. It's time for another episode of Dear Jane. I'm Scott Baker, and she is Marcie Little. Marcie, how are you?
Great.
You know what? It dawned on me that we have failed miserably to do when we start these podcasts. We have forgot to tell people every Thursday when you wake up, boom, there we are. We got a new episode.
Yep.
Every single Thursday, just like clockwork. Last week you got some weeks you get a little bonus episode, but one thing is for certain: every Thursday is when you can see and hear, listen to a new episode of Dear Jane.
If you're one of those people that, no judgment, you roll over, you wake up, you open up your phone, you see what's going on. If you open up your YouTube app or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, boom, there's Dear Jane waiting for you. Lots of fun, interesting, enlightening, educational conversations. Ready for you.
So you wake up, you say, okay, it's Thursday. You might want to think, okay, we're almost to Friday. No. The first thing you think, oh, Dear Jane. Hey, there's a new episode of Dear Jane. Got to check in with my friends, Marcie and Scott.
Yep.
So today, we've got a couple things we're going to get people fired up about. We're going to talk about how pro-life people are terrorists, according to the federal government. And we're also going to talk about what choice really means and what in the state of Massachusetts. And I think some blood is going to boil, but it's important that we draw attention to some of these things. So we're going to do that here in a second. But first, let's make sure we mention our sponsor, Choose Life Marketing.
Choose Life Marketing is your partner if you're a pro-life organization that needs to get the word out about your mission. Maybe you need to get it out to the target audience that you serve, whether that's abortion-minded women or lawmakers, regardless of who that audience is, or maybe you need help fundraising and connecting with your donors. Choose Life Marketing can help with all of that. They can help you tell your story to the right people at the right time to grow your mission and ultimately help you save lives. So check them out, chooselifemarketing.com today. All
right. Thank you to them for sponsoring us. Hey, all right, you ready? We're going to get fired up.
I don't think people are ready for this.
Well, if some people have seen it, but you're gonna believe that this is some sort of fake deal on social media or whatever. But it has been confirmed.
Fake news,
It really did happen. So this is from a brief, an anti-terrorism brief that has been held apparently multiple times. At least at Fort Bragg, or what they call Fort Liberty now. My guess is if it's happened there more than once, it's probably happened elsewhere. Mm-hmm. But so the point is they were training soldiers on terrorist groups, domestic terrorist groups. And as you can see from the slide here, somebody took a picture of the slide that was presented. Pro-life groups or anti-abortion groups are considered terrorist groups. That is to include National Right to Life. That is to include people with Choose Life license plates. And you can see it for yourself. I mean, it talks about if you oppose Roe v. Wade, or Roe, W-R-O, how they like to spell it, you are a terrorist. And I think what's important here is not an extremist, not, hey, sometimes these people can get a terrorist group. That is really inflammatory and really outrageous.
To talk about training at a U.S. military base, and it's pretty serious. Like, this is a briefing that members of the United States military are receiving on groups that are potential terrorist threats. Why else would they have this training, right? And if you see on the slide, I don't know if you guys can see on the screen, but the types of advocacy that they say these pro-life terror groups engage in are things like demonstrations and protest, mass demonstrations, life chain. So life chain is when people might surround an abortion facility or something and they hold hands and they're praying. The truth display, which I think might be when groups show the results of abortion through pictures, picketing, And then they also list counseling. So they have sidewalk counseling, crisis center counseling. They have pictures and they list license plates. So if you have one of those Choose Life license plates, that could be an indication that you are part of a terror cell and a terrorist organization in the United States. But I want to hone in on demonstrations and protest. Isn't that part of our First Amendment, freedom of speech, right to gather, right to protest? And look at all of the protests that go on in the United States on a daily basis. We had the mostly peaceful protest of 2020, but even recently we've had some not so peaceful protests that resulted in burning the American flag outside Union Station in DC. I don't think our military is being told that those people are terrorists. And yet, because these groups actually are peaceful in their approach to saving lives, they're labeled terrorists.
You know, a few things stick out to me. One is if you read this reporter's commentary on the side, he provides some additional context. He says the slide you see here followed right after a slide about ISIS. Okay, so this is the context of, okay, soldiers, however, whatever level, rank, or whatever. Okay, soldiers, here are terrorists we need to be worried about. ISIS, yes. Pro-life people, what? I mean, they're lumping pro-life people, and then this will really get you mad. And the person, there's a head in the way, so you can't really see on the graph here, or if you're listening, you can't see it at all. But it talks about bombings of clinics, and they're talking about bombings of abortion clinics. No mention of any of the stuff that's been done to pregnancy centers in the last 3 years, which has been significant, which has been real violence. Actual terrorism.
Firebombing pregnancy clinics, some which still have not fully been able to reopen. There was one here, I'm in Colorado. There was one in northern Colorado that's still recovering from the aftermath of that. There were churches firebombed for their pro-life stance. You don't see that type of activity from pro-life organizations. No. And yet they're the ones being labeled as terror groups.
Yeah, and so what has happened since then is that there have been, there's been some activity in the House since that, conservative Republicans can have more of a say on what they talk about there. So there have been some, I know, some letters and maybe some hearings in the House of Representatives, especially on the Armed Services Committee. But this just goes to show you that elections matter. And this kind of, as I think about all of this, I think about, kind of the conversations that we have had before about, well, I'm not going to vote for this person because they don't align exactly with how I feel, word for word. I agree with about 80%. I mean, let's even talk about the life issue, okay? We're about 80% in alignment, but they're over here, so I'm not going to support them at all. Well, okay, but this is what you get when you sit it out, or when you just let others have a say and you don't have a say as a pro-life person. You get this kind of nonsense, and it's scary. It really is.
It is, and I think this also highlights something I think about a lot, which, and I don't know if this has ever been the case, but I think people have a mistaken idea that if they vote for the individual, they're voting for an individual's abortion or pro-life policies. And that may be true to a certain extent, but what you're really voting for is that person's party affiliation and their stance on abortion. So some examples of this, I was cutting my teeth in a pro-life organization back during the Obama administration. And people who've been around for a while may remember that the IRS under the Obama administration was holding up 501c3 nonprofit designations for pro-life organizations. So the one I worked for took a lot longer than it normally takes to get approved, even though we were a ministry that was designed to help women in crisis pregnancies and unplanned pregnancies. So that was an example. Then you certainly didn't see this type of action being taken by the U.S. military under the Trump administration. And that's because his party affiliation would never support that. And you really are voting for the party. And I know that we've talked recently about the party changes on the GOP side. I would argue that the GOP still is the party that's best positioned to take care of nonsense like this. They,
Yeah.
they're not gonna stand for the United States military hosting training about peaceful pro-life organizations in the United States being terrorist groups.
And I understand people who want to send a message to the Republican Party, for example, is okay, I'm not really happy with these changes that you're making, so I am going to withhold my support because of that, just to send you a message. I get that, but again, this is what you get if you basically sit it out. Just to follow up more on what exactly is going on. So this is like a letter from Representative Banks, and it's kind of small. You can't see it here too well, but their demand. Apparently, this has been happening for a while. It's just now coming out. This is something that traces back to at least last summer of 2023, and again has happened multiple times here. And if I just go back to the point of if this is what we know about, what don't we know about?
Yeah. I mean, that one person happened to be in the room and happened to have the presence of mind to take a photo of it and say, wait a second, we were just talking about ISIS 2 seconds ago, and now we're talking about pro-life organizations in the same vein. There's something wrong with this.
So elections matter. Elections matter. And I don't know. I guess I harp on this because I hear this so much in our movement of I'm not going to vote for somebody or vote for a party or whatever because we're not completely in alignment. Well, this is the alternative. That pro-life people are being singled out by the military in our country, not some third world country, and the United States as terrorist cells.
And I would encourage people who struggle with that, maybe your conscience is troubled by that, to take some time and really study American history and American political history. I remember going through the Smithsonian one time in DC, the U.S. History Museum, and just being struck. They had an exhibit on previous elections, and a lot of the people, I was like, I've never heard of this person before, because they didn't end up winning and they didn't become president, and it was far enough back that I wasn't around for that. But just to see the campaign messaging that's always existed, I think we have this false sense of like politics is so nasty now, and it used to be civil. Politics has always been nasty, and it's always been about compromise and about coming together and trying to work with people that are mostly on the same page as you, even if it's not how many of us could say, maybe outside of our closest family members, that we agree 100% with any other one person? I think of like my grandparents. My granddad was a Democrat. My grandma was a Republican. Like, they didn't agree on a lot of things, and certainly weren't in alignment on most of their policy positions. And so I just say all of that to say we can have even vast disagreements with people, but agree on the most important things and look at it critically and say, what is going to provide the most protection to the values and the positions I hold? Which candidate or which party platform is most closely aligned? And to your point earlier, Scott, about people wanting to send a message, I would submit, and this is something that I've just been recently involved with just in the last few years, the place where you can make the most difference is in your local politics. So joining your local party, going to meetings, it is frustrating and it is sometimes annoying to think I just spent my whole Saturday at this assembly and what did we accomplish? But you have a much greater chance of accomplishing change at the local level than you do at the national level. By the time it reaches the national level, you just got to cast a vote.
Yeah. No, and that's a good point. And I understand what we're talking about here is a federal issue, but your point is well taken in that a lot of stuff happens. That's a trap we fall into sometimes. Is I mean, all the news covers the federal stuff and everything else, but even at the city council level, we're seeing some really heinous stuff going on as it relates to pregnancy centers and zoning, and we'll talk about some of this here in just a second. But yes, at the local level, if you feel overwhelmed sometime about what's going on nationally, that sort of stuff, do not underestimate the impact that you can have locally. School boards, all of the above, I think that are so important. So I think that that's an excellent point.
And even just being involved, especially if you care about politics and you care about a particular party, I think my point too is if you join the party at the local level, it's going to take that type of groundswell among the states and the state parties to push our national party in the direction we want it to go. And this is the same for politicians very rarely hear from constituents on the pro-life issue. I think people are much louder right now on gender issues and immigration issues. If they never hear about it, it's not going to be a priority for them. They're going to prioritize other issues. And so applying pressure through joining your local and state parties and trying to impact change there, paying attention to what's going on and calling your congressman or calling your state rep is an effective way to engage beyond just voting. And I think voting, we think of is the least level of effort that you can give. And I think that's right. But because of that, it should also be there should be a lot more that we do if we're wanting to impact change.
We want to hear from you. What do you think? You can send us an email at dearjanepodcast@chooselifecoalition.org, or you can comment, and it's what they do in real podcasters.
Yeah.
They point below.
Down below.
You can comment down below. But we do want to hear from you. What do you think? What do you think is the answer to this? Unfortunately, it's not gonna get better. That's not to say it's hopeless, but I think it's a real problem that needs to be addressed. Speaking of big problems, so we have talked about this quite a bit on Dear Jane. We have a special affinity for pregnancy centers here. I believe, you believe, pregnancy centers are on the front line in this fight for life because they are there every single day talking to the women and the men, but where the rubber hits the road, where the decision is being made, pregnancy centers are on the front lines. And you need no further evidence of that than how they are in the target. They're the target of the other side. They're enemy number one of big abortion. The other side recognizes just how effective pregnancy centers are. So, and I think they've recognized it before some people in our movement have recognized it. And they are going after some of these pregnancy centers in ways that would blow your mind.
Yep. In fact, if you happen to live in the state of Massachusetts, and particularly in Western Massachusetts, you may be aware of some of the types of attacks that we're talking about, because your state government has rolled out a billboard campaign to inform innocent, unable to think for themselves citizens of the state of Massachusetts about the sinister nature of pregnancy centers, or as they have deemed that or called them, anti-abortion clinics. Anti-abortion clinics has actually been written into state laws. That is the official word for pregnancy resource centers. And so, yeah, they have these billboards up all over the state of Massachusetts, and it directs people to the state website, all funded through their HHS program. There's been over $1 million of taxpayer funding funneled into this campaign. And it's all about how you can spot anti-abortion centers and where you can go for true abortion care. My favorite part of the website, Scott, as I've been poking around, is they have this list of like FAQ type things on their homepage. And one of the questions is, how can I spot an anti-abortion center? And the first warning sign that they list is the center name includes words like hope, options, or choice/choices.
No.
Can you believe that? That an organization would exist to give women choices? The audacity.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what if warns women to avoid centers that offer hope and feature pictures of babies and children. That's the red flag that they want you to see is if they're telling you that there's hope, watch out. I mean, what more do you need to know about just how dark these people are, really?
I want to know what that conversation was like in the brainstorming room. Like, okay, what are the buzzwords we're going to tell them to look out for? Oh, I know, hope.
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't that what you want women to feel when they're facing an unplanned pregnancy?
Well, and then you look at the billboard and it talks about, they mislead you about your options if you're pregnant. This gets back to the whole thing. And again, we've talked about this study before here on Dear Jane about there is proof of the coercion that takes place at abortion centers, right? You talk about anti-choice. It's in an abortion center. And we've heard from people who used to work in clinics who will testify to this.
Yep.
It's just so, not only is this misleading, it's just intentionally false. It's intentionally trying to confuse. This is just, this is crazy that tax dollars are being spent on this in Massachusetts. And here's the thing, even if you don't live in Massachusetts, it's a copycat world when it comes to lawmaking. Okay. We see this all the time. One state, one group of crazy lawmakers in some state will come up with some sort of anti-life language, whether it has to do with how pro-life groups can advertise themselves, whatever. And then another group in another state will see it and it starts to spread like wildfire. So just because you're not in Massachusetts doesn't mean that it doesn't affect you. These things grow like crazy and they get worse and worse each and every time.
And the fact that it's, like you said, taxpayer funded. Yeah. So it doesn't matter if you are pro-life and maybe you support a pregnancy center in the state of Massachusetts. Now, some of your money is going to support that center and some of your money is going to attack that very same center.
So on the website, it says anti-abortion centers, often called crisis pregnancy centers, look like medical facilities but don't offer comprehensive care. What abortion clinic offers comprehensive care?
When their workers at abortion clinics have sales quotas that they have to meet to sell a certain number of abortions every month, there's no comprehensive care there. There's no choice. It's been widely proven through various, just looking at Planned Parenthood's annual reports every year, that their service is abortion. It's people used to say, "Oh, what about mammograms?" They don't actually offer mammograms. Most of the abortion clinics in the Planned Parenthood network don't even offer STD treatment. They might offer STD testing, but they don't offer treatment for it. Oh, we can test you for it, but you got to go somewhere else if you have an STD. They are about one thing and one thing only, and that is abortion, versus these pregnancy care centers offer women real choices. They say, you can choose to parent, you can choose to adopt. By the way, if you choose to parent, we have all these resources and support available. We can connect you with a mentor. We understand this might be scary. And do you know why they're so effective? Because according to many studies, women who face unplanned pregnancies walk away, and if they have abortions, they walk away and they say, if one person had offered their support, I would have made a different choice. Because most women don't wake up or don't dream when they're little girls of one day having an abortion. That's not what they actually want. But for some reason, the other side is so obsessed and says the only possible outcome for you is that you should have an abortion. And so we have to label the other side as anti-choice and paint them as villains because they know how effective pregnancy centers are.
So what can you do? You might be listening there. You might see some of the things that we're sharing on the screen and say, okay, what, especially, you live in a state like Massachusetts or New York or California, and we know what the political situation is in those states, right? And so you think, okay, what can I even do about it? I would suggest you contact your local pregnancy center. Say, what do y'all need? Because these folks are literally, in some cases, just like we were talking about, literally under attack. I mean, in violent ways, like we've talked about, but even in ways like this, in ways like, another particularly terrible example I've seen is of state legislation that wants to dictate what can and cannot be said inside a pregnancy center. That they want you to follow the approved state script, which you can imagine what it is, right? I mean, you talk about infringement on free speech and everything else. And then, of course, we know about wanting to put limits on how these pregnancy centers advertise and market their services to vulnerable women. So I don't know about you. That's the first place I would start is go down and say, what do y'all need? What help can I offer for you to accomplish your day-to-day mission?
Yep. Yeah. And they always have needs. They always have things that you can help with or material goods that you can donate. Because like we said, they exist to support women. And a lot of times women consider abortion because of where they are financially. And so if a pregnancy center can help get women on their feet and help provide some of those physical resources that they need, diapers are so expensive. Yeah. Formula, anything that a new mom would need for a baby. I would also say try to find out if there's a pro-life political group in your state and see what they're doing and see if you can help. We're going to have to fight this from both ends. We need the pregnancy centers to stay on the ground and support women on the front lines, but they are slowly going to start having their hands tied more and more so that they're not able to do that if we can't get them air cover and support on the political side. Because Scott was just mentioning like all these different states that have passed legislation chipping away at what pregnancy centers are able to do. In Colorado right now, pregnancy centers are not allowed to advertise for or provide abortion pill reversal because of our crazy state legislature. And they have to be really careful about how they advertise. I know other states are considering similar legislation, and they're going to start because of the hornet's nest that was kicked when Dobbs came down. They're just going to find more and more creative ways to come after pregnancy centers, and part of how we help is on the political side as well.
Hey, we would love to hear from you, our listeners. If you've got any ideas for guests or any kind of questions, that sort of thing, anything you'd like for us to talk about, we could include your emails. Shoot us an email at dearjanepodcast@chooselifecoalition.org. dearjanepodcasts@chooselifecoalition.org. We would love to hear from you.
And make sure that you're following the Dear Jane podcast on social media. We're on Facebook, we're on X, Instagram, YouTube. Just look for Dear Jane Podcast. Follow along. It'd also be fun if you dropped us a comment every now and then. We have some interesting comments on some of our stuff from the other side. So they're commenting. You can join in on the fun if you're a keyboard warrior and that's your thing. But give us a follow. Make sure you don't miss any episodes. We post a bunch of reels from the show too that make it easier for you to share so that your friends are aware of the podcast as well.
All right. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.